Welcome to Uncovered. It's Wednesday. That means that it's me, Anthony Davis, and him, Ron Filipkowski, and together we uncover the MAGA propaganda that is not covered by the mainstream media, which seems to be increasingly letting us down at the moment, Ron. I don't know if you've really noticed, but there's this kind of huge gap. We'll come to that a little bit later. We've got lots to talk about, some major breaking news today. Firstly, the stepping down of Mitch McConnell, GOP Senate leader. We'll come to that in just a second. But first, the biggest breaking news story that we should really start this episode on is the fact that Donald Trump does not have the money, that Donald Trump is broke. He cannot pay up. He owes, what is it, $450 million?
Yeah, well, this is pretty funny because it completely contradicts everything that he said in his deposition, everything Alina Habba has been saying. You know, when she was first asked about this, you know, does Trump have the money? Can he put this up? Oh, yes, no problem. She said specifically, he's a billionaire many times over. This won't be a problem. Trump said it won't be a problem. And look, part of his whole facade, part of his whole persona is to come across as this billionaire, this highly successful billionaire. And we've all said for many years that this is not real. He's leveraged to the hilt. He's not liquid. He claimed to have $400 million cash in the bank. Then when it comes time to put it up to file his appeal, he doesn't have it. He says, I can come up with $100 million and I need more time. And by the way, breaking about 10 minutes ago, the appeals court actually ruled on this, on his request for more time. They denied it. What they did is they denied the stay. They said, nope, we are not going to delay this. You've got whatever it is, 5 more days, I think he's got to put up the money. Or you know, they're going to allow to start seizing your properties. They did grant the stay only limited. They said, we will allow you to continue to operate your businesses and to try and secure loans or financing on them. So we're not going to seize control of your businesses, but we are not going to delay you putting up the money.
Let's take a quick clip of Alina Habba doing this, exactly what you said. Oh, he's a billionaire. They're all covering for him. Here she is.
My goodness. So Judge Engoron says that he wants this $350 million within 30 days. Now, I know that you're planning on appealing this, but you've still got to put up the full amount pending that appeal. Does Donald Trump have that kind of money sitting around?
Yes. I mean, he does. Of course, he has money. You know, he's a billionaire. We know that. And
of course, he has money. It's, you know, specifics are not something that these kind of Republican operatives are very interested in.
No. I mean, she said, of course, he's a billionaire. He's got money. No problem. I mean, if there's any time that if you have money, you're going to use it, it's going to be right now.
Yeah.
Put up the financing to save your business and your business empire. And for some reason, he can't come up with the cash. Now, he claims Mar-a-Lago is worth $1.5 billion is what he claims, which is a preposterous number.
Yeah.
But why doesn't he do like a home refinance? He could easily get $400 million loan on that property, equity loan, and put up this bond if it's really worth that much. So I don't know what
the other problem is that he's burnt his bridges with lenders, right? The idea that he can just go out like any other businessman and get a loan is now compromised by nature of the fact that he's in front of so many judges. There are so many legal cases against him, and the fact that, you know, a lot of his money previously came from Saudi Arabia, potentially came from Russia. There's some people say that, and even Chinese loans. I mean, what's the reality here in terms of his ability to actually get finance?
Well, really, the only bank that would do business with him when he was in deep financial trouble was Deutsche Bank, you know, and he had kind of burned his bridges with a lot of other banks. They wouldn't do business with him. And they were the ones who stepped up and provided all of these loans that are in question in this particular case. But they won't do business with him anymore either. So I'm not really sure. I kind of tend to believe, if I had to bet on something, that there's going to be some sort of private person, maybe that's going to come forward with a vast fortune, who's a right winger somewhere. Who knows? Maybe even Elon Musk will, will give him like a personal loan. I don't know, but obviously he's a very high risk individual to fork over that kind of cash to.
Letitia James has said that she will seize assets. I mean, she could go after his properties. Trump Tower, there's the building that she looks at out of her office every day that she referred to one time. But there's also, I mean, he owns a Boeing 757. I mean, that's got to be worth 50 million or something. I mean, you know, what are the chances of a debt collector actually showing up and seizing his assets?
I think she's prepared to do that as early as possible. I just got to believe that he's going to do everything he possibly can, whatever that is, to come up with this bond money. I mean, he could go through a bonding company, but there again, here's the problem. You know, he's got to pay them a premium, which is going to be a big chunk of change. That's non-refundable. He's never going to get that back, so that's going to be gone. And he's got to put up the collateral for the balance of it. And then he's got to find a company willing to do it. I don't know. I just got to believe that he's going to somehow come up with the money, because he always has seemed to, over the course of his life and his career, found a way to come up with some money somewhere. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know how he could sell a huge property that fast.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether he has that many properties that aren't leveraged, you know, that don't have big loans on them where they're liquid.
I'm hoping that this, Ron, is really embarrassing for him. You know, the idea, because this is the thing that hurts him the most, right? The veil, you know, being pulled aside, and all of these, you know, this fabrication projection about being the richest, the biggest, the tallest, the wealthiest. It's all garbage. And this is a very public exposure of the fact that he is, you know, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain.
And we're seeing really why he was so panicked, why he was so freaked out by that trial, and why he went so crazy and was constantly ranting and raving on social media at gag orders, you know, threats, because he didn't have the money. He doesn't have the money to pay if he loses. So that means assets being seized. And, you know, what could be more humiliating for him than, you know, Trump Tower being seized by the state of New York? Because he can't come up with the money for the appeal. You know, the reality is what they say in the press, we've done this drill before, is all nonsense. What they say when they get put under oath, when they get in courtrooms, whether it's on the election fraud stuff, whether it's January 6th stuff, or whether it's on Trump's money, every time they get under oath or get in a courtroom, then, you know, the real truth comes out.
Yeah. There you go. You're back. What I think is also interesting here is that so many of his properties are under license. So the brand name might say Trump, but they're not actually his. And so it gives the impression that he is, you know, got all of these assets, but actually they're not his at all. And you know, some of these companies that pay him the brand license fee to put, I don't know the specifics. I have a feeling maybe the Trump Hotel Las Vegas might be one of these that is under license. But the reality is it makes him look like he has more than he does. But actually, these are other companies that have the debt and, you know, have the asset.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sure. I mean, he's able to use these games, these accounting tricks on paper to make himself look wealthier than he really is.
Right.
But he's not.
What are the chances of him coming to, you know, the Trump cult, the Trump voters, and asking for money for this very specific issue? Because, you know, I want to show this clip of Lara Trump at the RNC when she was asked, do you think that, you know, paying for Trump's legal bills is something of interest to Republican voters? Let's just see how she responded.
You think paying for President Trump's legal bills is something that is of interest to Republican voters?
Absolutely. That's why you've seen a GoFundMe get started. That's why people are furious right now, and they see the attacks against him. They feel like it's an attack not just on Donald Trump, but on this country.
Yeah, I mean, it's all just projection, isn't it? But, you know, the reality is he needs the money, and he does go after these, you know, regular people, giving him their last dime. They'll do that for him. And in this case, you know, he could set up a GoFundMe overnight.
Well, not him, but somebody on his behalf already has. I think they've raised about $1 million so far, a little
Right.
over, but that barely covers the interest. So,
Yeah.
that's not really getting them very far as being able to pay anything off. Now, what's interesting about her statement that she just gave is, what I said is you don't come right out and say what she just said. You don't tell everybody before the vote, and the vote on the RNC is next week as far as if she's going to get elected chair.
Right.
You don't tell them ahead of time, I'm going to take all the money and give it to Trump, give it to my father-in-law. Because what happened is, of course, she said that, and at least several of the members of the RNC who are going to be voting on this have introduced a resolution trying to block this, saying that no money can go to Trump, no money can go to his legal bills. And in fact, anybody that's connected to the Trump campaign right now cannot hold office with the RNC. So, I mean, whether that'll fly or not, I don't know. But the point is, Laura Trump has no idea what she's doing. She has no qualifications whatsoever. She doesn't know how to play this game. And she just showed it in that interview by just coming out and blurting those things out, which is sheer stupidity. And the people on the RNC are justifiably alarmed. They're saying, well, wait a minute. This isn't what the RNC is for, to be a slush fund for Donald Trump. So that meeting next week of the RNC is going to be really, really interesting, not just to see if Laura Trump gets elected. I assume she probably will. But what happens with those resolutions trying to block her from being able to, funnel money to Trump?
And thinking about it, Rona McDaniel is no saint herself. But if Lara Trump becomes the head of the RNC, then that contributes to the collapse of the GOP, of the Republican Party as we know it. Because, we've spoken so many times, and even Joe Biden says, it's not your father or your grandfather's Republican Party anymore. The more that Trump infiltrates the GOP, whether it be at the RNC or whether it be in Congress or anywhere else, it is contributing to the collapse of the traditional conservative movement. And I can only imagine that if Lara Trump gets her fingers into the RNC, then that will only continue.
Yeah, and this is what I said. It's not like Ronna McDaniel is any superstar or was anything great, but at least she tried to play it straight. She understood what the role of the job was. She tried to placate Trump as much as she could, but always kept him at arm's length. But yeah, I mean, this takeover by Trump is going to turn the RNC into an illegitimate organization and an organization that's not going to help Republicans across the board and across the country. It's only going to exist to help Donald Trump, and that's not what it's there for.
And that will be yet another thing in November or leading up to November that will be damaging for the Republican vote. Because I'm sure with Lara Trump in charge, they'll be in disarray, it'll be chaos, probably very similar to the first Trump administration where nobody really knew what they were doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the person who's really going to run the day-to-day operations is the guy from North Carolina who's the state party chair that he's installed there. But I think he's put Laura Trump there to keep an eye on him and keep him loyal and make sure that he's doing what he's supposed to do. So I don't think she's necessarily going to be running the day-to-day stuff, but I'm not sure that any of the people he's bringing in are going to do anything for any of the other candidates. I think that they'll do a reasonably good job for Donald Trump, and they'll do everything that they can to help his campaign.
Yeah.
But as far as helping anybody else out around the country, that's just not going to happen.
We'll come back to Trump in a minute because I want to talk about, those sneakers, the gold sneakers and how, there's this rhetoric that, black people will buy it because they love sneakers. And also Trump saying that, he's like black people because he's being persecuted. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. We'll come back to that in a minute. First, let's talk about this other breaking news story, which is that Mitch McConnell, the leader of the GOP in the Senate, is announced that he's to be stepping down in November. Is anyone surprised?
No, it was coming at some point. I think just it came out of the blue. There was no sort of lead up to it. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out. Of course, MAGA is all celebrating.
Yeah.
The people that are most excited or most happy about this are the MAGA Republican people because they hate Mitch and they wanted Mitch gone, and Trump hates Mitch. So they're happy. But, you know, of course, what they want is to have one of their own installed as the Senate leader. And who they want is Rick Scott. I mean, there's been a few other names tossed around that are not realistic, like Rand Paul, people like that. Somebody crazy like Rand Paul couldn't get any votes. I think it's gonna come down to either John Thune, who is, you know, Mitch McConnell's right-hand man. That's certainly the establishment guy, very conservative, but establishment, versus Rick Scott, who's going to be the Trump-aligned, sort of MAGA-aligned person here. And that's really what it's going to come down to. So that's going to be an interesting battle right there. Of course, that battle won't happen until November because he's not stepping down from leadership until November. But that's one thing. You know, the other thing is the legacy of Mitch McConnell is something that, you know, to sort of step back and look at. I think if you asked Mitch McConnell, you know, what was your greatest achievement, he would say reshaping the federal judiciary, you know, with the Bush appointees and then the Trump appointees, where he hooked up with, you know, Leonard Leo and they completely transformed the judiciary, not just the Supreme Court, but the judiciary as a whole. So I think if you asked him, that's what he would say. What I would say is his greatest failure by far is January 6th and the second impeachment. I mean, look, impeachment failed by, I think, only 9 votes. I think they needed 8 or 9 more votes to get impeachment passed and to convict him. And then we wouldn't be sitting here worried about Donald Trump right now if the second impeachment had gone through. And Mitch McConnell was the tipping point there. I mean, he was giving every indication that he was going to vote to convict. Every speech he gave, every indication he gave was he was going to go that way. And I think that a lot of the establishment senators were going to follow Mitch's lead wherever he went. And at the very last minute, nobody knew how he was going to vote. I mean, people forget. Nobody knew. Everybody, what's Mitch going to do? And I believe it was the day before he made his announcement that he was going to vote to acquit Donald Trump. And now I kind of think he regrets that now as things have played out and Trump has really turned on Mitch despite him saving his ass. But yeah, I think Trump would be gone today if Mitch had gone to convict. And I think that's the greatest stain. There's a lot of bad things in Mitch's legacy. That's the worst one, I think.
I mean, let's not forget what Mitch McConnell said about January 6th and about Donald Trump as the instigator prior to, or the day after January 6th, you know, when they were having those kind of that Senate debate and everybody was, you know, giving their little bit about it. You know, he effectively blamed Donald Trump and was very specific about, you know, who was at fault in terms of instigating the insurrection. And then, as with all of these guys, they go and meet Donald Trump for an afternoon tea, and they come back fully brainwashed again. You know, there must be compromise, leverage, something.
And Mitch's wife resigned. You know, she quit right after January 6th, I think the next day. So, yeah, it definitely came as a surprise. And I think Mitch did the political calculus and figured out that, you know, if Trump gets convicted, all those MAGA voters that he brought into the party are going to leave. They're going to form a third party. Trump might form a third party. And I think he probably looked at that and figured, you know what, maybe, you know, the odds of him getting elected again are not good. So let's just keep it the way it is.
I didn't realize that Mitch McConnell kind of started out working in Gerald Ford's Justice Department back in the 1970s and was a moderate, effectively. He supported abortion rights and labor unions and, you know, had a reputation for, you know, pragmatism. But, you know, as time went on, he became more hard-nosed. And as the party moved to the right, he moved to the right. And so, you know, he's really presided over this shift to the right and now the far right.
Yeah, I think that happened in the 90s, you know, when Clinton was president, is when Mitch made his hard right turn. And he was an ambitious guy. He wanted to get into the leadership, and he probably figured that that's where he needed to go to get there, to be more conservative. So he was definitely never a liberal, but he was always one of these guys that, he used to sort of like an Orrin Hatch, if anybody remembers him, a guy who was conservative, but was a deal maker. And I think he still has some of that in him. I mean, we've seen him this week pressuring Mike Johnson to get with the program.
Yeah. Over the government
Mitch
shutdown.
is still one of those old guard deal makers who will compromise and who can work with Joe Biden. And that's really why MAGA wants him out. That's why they don't like him.
Yeah. Joe Biden said he was sorry to hear that Mitch McConnell planned to leave his post as the top Senate Republican, remembering him as an antagonist who never misrepresented anything. He said, "He and I have trust. We've got a great relationship. We fight like hell, but we never misrepresented anything." He said this at the White House earlier today. He said, "I'm sorry to hear that he's stepping down." I mean, they served in the Senate together for 24 years. But let's not also deny that Mitch McConnell has been very unwell. And, he had a fall. He's had 2 freeze-ups where he looks like he's been abducted by aliens from the inside and, suddenly rendered speechless in the middle of a press conference. That is not something that the Republicans want to, encourage people who are not well enough to serve, right?
Yeah. Well, that's true. And we don't know when those episodes are going to come back. These guys, it's sort of the same thing I felt about Joe Biden. And I felt like I don't understand why none of these people want to retire. I mean, in terms of like why they don't want to enjoy, the last closing years of their life on the beach or relaxing or, vacationing. I mean, these guys, they're just wired differently than maybe a lot of people.
But you can't compare the two. I mean, Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden are completely different in terms of their health and their ability to serve. I mean, if you saw Joe Biden on the Seth Meyers show a couple of nights ago, I mean, he was amazing. He was, lucid. He was comedic. He had great comic timing. He was, it proved the critics that proved to the critics that actually, there is a lot of gas in the tank with Joe Biden. Whereas I can't imagine Mitch McConnell going on a late night talk show and being able to shoot from the hip.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he's not leaving the Senate. I mean, he's stepping down from leadership, so it's not like he's going anywhere. But, the other thing is, I mean, Joe Biden is running to be president for almost 5 more years from right now. So that all I'm saying is I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm saying what I'm saying is I don't know why these guys don't want to enjoy a retirement, why they want to work until they're 85.
But he was retired, though. Joe Biden was retired, effectively.
Yeah, exactly.
When he finished as vice president to Barack Obama. But it was Donald Trump and fine people on both sides that brought him out of retirement. Right. And he knew that he might be the only person that could win the election. And he was right, and we keep underestimating this guy, and yet he keeps delivering. And this is why he says, don't, judge me on my record. And so I think we really need to get over this idea that Joe Biden is compromised in any way. Because I know when I'm 81, I'm going to need a lot of lie downs. I'm going to need a lot of daytime sleeps, undoubtedly. This guy just keeps going and going. He's fit, he's well, he's slim, he's energized. I just cannot listen to this kind of negative critique of his health anymore when, the worst thing that's happened to him is hurting his foot, tripping over the dog.
And since I lost my virtual background, speaking of dogs, my cat is making a debut on the show here.
I saw that. I'm pleased that you said it was your cat.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this issue with Trump and his relationship with Black Americans, because tell us about the conference that he got up at. What was this conference that he spoke at? It wasn't a majority Black audience. I think I saw one clip of panning around. There was an awful lot of white people there. What was this conference that he appeared at?
Yeah, it was supposed to be a Black conservative conference.
Right.
Black Republicans. And he got up and gave just one of the most offensive speeches you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
Where he's trying to, this is, Donald Trump trying to relate to Black people.
Yeah.
And what was really funny was, he did back-to-back events. One was evangelical event. So he's trying to I think that was in the morning, and then the Black conservative one was in the evening. So in the evangelical event, he's trying to relate to them, and he's talking about God, and he's incredibly uncomfortable and out of place doing that.
Yeah.
Then he goes to the black conservative thing, and he's trying to relate to black people, and he's telling them why black people should love him. And one of the things he mentioned was, his shoe stuff, and it was just an incredibly uncomfortable speech.
Well, it was blatantly racist. I mean, so much of what he says is blatantly racist. And, I don't know why a single black American would vote for Donald Trump. I know that they do, and I know that there is a movement. It's not the movement that you see. We talked last week about, 4 black people being paid to stand behind Donald Trump at the rallies. But there is a black conservative movement that I don't know much about, and I appreciate that. But it's not anything like on the scale that Trump would think. I'll show this clip, and we'll talk some more.
And then I got indicted a second time, and a third time, and a fourth time. And a lot of people said that that's why the black people like me, because they have been hurt so badly and discriminated against. And they actually viewed me as I'm being discriminated against. It's been pretty amazing, but it.
Yeah, he's basically saying, just to translate, that black people do criminal stuff and then they get arrested. And, so because I've been arrested, they can relate to me and I can relate to them. It is blatant racism. And I don't know why it didn't get more press attention.
Well, it certainly caught fire in black social media.
Right.
I saw a lot of the major influencers who are not really especially political that were pretty upset about those comments. And a lot of them were influencers who aren't especially in love with Joe Biden and are open to being sold by somebody who's credible. And I think he really shot himself in the foot with that comment and a few of the other comments that he made with a lot of them. Just in terms of, that just really caught fire across social media. It was incredibly racist, incredibly offensive. And I would think that that's going to be used in some campaign ads and targeted campaign ads in certain areas.
The sneakers thing, he claimed was Barron Trump's idea and design to kind of do sneakers. Barron's obsessed with sneakers. I'm going to do sneakers, and then, again, trying to connect with the black community. Completely offensive stuff, almost as offensive as this guy on Fox. Here it is.
This is connecting with black America because they love sneakers. They're into sneakers. They love this is a big deal, certainly in the inner city. So when you have Trump roll out his sneaker line, they're like, wait a minute, this is cool. He's reaching them on a level that defies and is above politics. The culture always trumps politics. And Trump understands culture like no politician I've ever seen.
Question for you on that point, though.
Yeah.
Will the people that are excited about the sneakers and excited about Donald Trump, will that translate into them going out and voting for Donald Trump?
Well, anybody willing to put $400 down for a pair of sneakers? Yeah, I think that's commitment and love. It's something. You're right. It's something. It's affection.
I can't watch. I just can't watch. Who is that guy? Looks like Pee Wee Herman, a conservative Pee Wee Herman. Who was that?
He's a guest host for Laura Ingraham. Right. I don't remember his name off the top of my head. He's not really that big of a person.
Let's not remember his name.
He's like a Fox contributor, and he's on their payroll, and he fills in sometimes for a couple other hosts. But I mean, the fact that no one of the 4 people on that set spoke up and said, "What the hell are you talking about, man?" Yeah. Black people can relate to Trump because he's selling $18 shoes for $400. And he's saying if people are, first of all, how many black people actually bought those shoes? How many black people bought those shoes who aren't Trump supporters? I mean, I would say it has to be close to 0. That number has to be close to 0. So no, I don't. Number one, the gold shoes are not going to help him win any black votes whatsoever. I don't think him being indicted for 91 felonies is going to help him win any black votes or make them feel like he's simpatico with them. I don't think that's going to work either. And I think him and other Republicans claiming that it is going to work is only going to hurt him. It's going to cost him votes. They're so stupid. They're so dumb that they don't even know how to make the case here. If they're trying to get black votes, they're certainly not going to get any black female votes. They know that. But if they're trying to get black male votes, there might be a path for them to do that in some ways. This is not that path.
It shows how little they have learned and understanding the Black American experience and having any kind of understanding of how America looks through a black lens. You know, and I'm married to a black woman, so I say this with some experience because we talk about this stuff all the time at home. And I recognize that there is, there's two completely different worlds. And Trump trying to reach out with this argument that because black people are persecuted and he's persecuted, that they are connected. It is so dumb. It is so offensive. It is so blatantly racist. And yet he actually said it. Like, it came out of his mouth. It might be something that you might toy with backstage, and one of your advisors would be like, you can't say that. That is not acceptable. There is just no awareness. And it strikes me that, there's none of this. I think going forward, he's going to do more of this stuff. He's going to continue to say more ridiculous, extreme, and blind, just a total blindness to culture and society. And I think that will alienate him from voters going into November.
Yeah, the more desperate that he gets.
Yeah.
I mean, when you really think about this practically, I mean, number one, how many black voters are even going to consider voting for Trump? Number one. Number two is how many, if he's trying to relate them because they're also felons, let's say they also have felony convictions, well, then they can't vote anyway in most places. So if he's trying to appeal to the black convicted felon vote that are inclined to vote
it's
Republican,
not even that deep. It's not even that deep. He can't, he's not even thinking that far, Ron. It is literally, he's just being a racist and trying to excuse his own racism by being like, jovial about it. It's just terrible. This guy was the president, and now he's running again, and he says shit like this. I mean, it makes me really angry. We're gonna have to take a quick pause for our sponsor, but I want to come back. We've got Tommy Tuberville, we've got Byron Donalds talking about IVF. This IVF story is insane, and the way this has blown up. So we'll talk about that and that with Ron, me, Anthony, back in just a second. Are you self-conscious about your smile due to stains? Are your teeth aging you? Food and drink are known to stain teeth. Coffee, wine, they stain over time. So what can you do to brighten your smile? Well, you should give Smile Actives a try. Smile Actives is safe, effective, easy to use, and will keep you smiling proudly. I personally have been to a dentist and had a teeth whitening treatment. It was painful, it was uncomfortable, and it was not a experience that I would want to repeat. Well, simply add Smile Actives Pro Whitening Gel to your regular toothpaste. Do it at home. It's been formulated with polyclean technology to boost stain removal and deliver active whitening ingredients into teeth's grooves to get better whitening. People will start commenting on your whiter, brighter smile in just days. Smile Actives is the whitening boost your favorite toothpaste needs to give you the smile you deserve. Visit smileactives.com/uncovered today to receive a special buy one, get one free offer with auto delivery plus free shipping and handling. That's smileactives.com/uncovered. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details. And here they are. Okay, well, let's talk about Tommy Tuberville because, last week there was like a video that went out during the week, actually, of him talking about the IVF story, but really not knowing what IVF is. He obviously has absolutely no idea. And that hasn't really changed. But I just want to show this clip of him first talking about Joe Biden. Just check out the projection in this.
Going to win anyway. But I think they'll change probably around the convention time, move somebody in to try to get President Trump to run for his money. But Joe Biden, he can't win. He's trying to stay in there just so he'll stay out of jail, to be honest with you.
Interesting, Senator.
Trying to stay in just so he can stay out of jail. Does that sound familiar? Who else might be doing that?
I mean, Donald Trump is obviously running to stay out of prison. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, it's his whole game plan. That's why he's trying to delay these cases until after the election. It's so clearly obvious. And how is Joe Biden facing jail? What is he facing jail for? What crime? I mean, even if you look at the Hunter Biden investigation, and even if you believe everything that Comer and Jordan are saying, which is all lies, but let's just assume you believe it. It's still not a crime. At best, it's impeachment. At best, it's an impeachable offense if you want to stretch it, but there's no crime involved. There's no criminal law that's violated. So the idea that like Joe Biden is running for president to stay out of jail, it's utterly ridiculous. I mean, this guy comes up with something new and stupid every single day.
And this kind of is all connected with this, discovery that, this 1023 form with, that they claimed when they were kind of trying to gather evidence against Joe and Hunter Biden. It was Russian disinformation. I'll just show you a clip of Jim Jordan having to kind of answer questions on this very thing.
Did you take back what you said about the president's involvement in a bribery scheme now that Alexander Smirnov is proven to have made it up and it was based off Russian intelligence?
Doesn't change the four fundamental facts. Hunter Biden was put on the board of Burisma, gets paid $1 million a year.
You said the 1023 is the most corroborating piece of information you have.
It corroborates, but it doesn't change those fundamental facts. So now
but it's not true.
Well, so the FBI told us that this source was 14 years. This source was a paid source by the FBI. When we were trying to get the 1023, they told us, oh, this could jeopardize national security, the safety of this source. Didn't want to release it, and now they're saying, oh, he gave false information. The other thing, there's a story out today. Scott Brady, the U.S. attorney, did check the travel records of this confidential human source and found that he was at those places he said he was. So,
but your promotion of a bribery scheme was false.
Not at all. We're looking at the 4 facts I just gave you. Those facts are true. Absolutely true. But Joe Biden bragged about it.
But what Smirnov said is not true. Would you concede that?
Well, yeah, that's what the FBI is saying.
They're very clever the way they take these little tidbits. It's like, oh, well, Joe Biden might have eaten a sandwich, and Hunter Biden, he also ate a sandwich. And, okay, well, now we have proof. They definitely ate a sandwich. I mean, that's really what's going on here, isn't it? It's like things that are nothing, that get confirmed to be nothing, they then go, oh, well, there's proof that it happened. It was a sandwich.
Yeah, it's like any one of these conspiracy theories where they take certain facts that happened that in and of itself are harmless or innocent, but then they stitch them together to create this conspiracy to make it look bad. Like, Hunter Biden was called his father while he was at dinner with the Burisma executives. Well, then we learned from Devin Archer, he called his dad every single day. They talked every single day and they never discussed business. So there's nothing sinister there. Joe Biden supposedly called for the prosecutor in Ukraine. This is one of his 4 facts. He mentioned 4 facts. One of his 4 facts is that Biden called for the prosecutor in Ukraine, the chief prosecutor, to be fired. That is true. But the lie is that he wanted him fired because he was in the process of investigating Burisma. This is exactly not true. All the evidence shows that this is not true. Joe Biden wanted him fired along with every member of the EU because he wasn't prosecuting Burisma, because he wasn't prosecuting corruption cases. So this is what they do. They take these stray facts and they cast aspersions using these facts, but they can't prove them. They can't link any improprieties, as we've seen time and time again. So with Smirnov, and what he's saying is, we wanted this 1023, we wanted information about this informant, but the FBI wouldn't give it to us. Well, yes. Why? Because they had an ongoing investigation of this guy, and they ultimately ended up indicting him and arresting him, and he was a flight risk to flee the country. So if they had turned that over to them, they would have blabbed that to the press.
Yeah.
This guy likely would have fled the country and never would have been indicted or charged. So of course they're not going to turn that over, but they want to create that is somehow sinister.
Yes.
That the FBI wouldn't turn over this document claiming they had an ongoing investigation. Why? Oh, they're trying to protect Joe Biden. No, it's because they're trying to indict this guy.
So much of it is
how they do it.
It's projection, but what it means, and when we watch these clips of Trump supporters at rallies, they hear little bits of this because it gets repeated on Fox. And then they say, well, Joe Biden's corrupt because, or Hunter Biden's laptop because. And so they care, like I said at the very beginning of this show, they care nothing for the detail. But if you can drop little crumbs and you leave gaps, then people's imaginations fill in the gaps and they create the narrative. And that's when the conspiracy theories form. And that this is where we're at now. This is America now. It's riddled with false narratives and conspiracy theories so that people who don't have the time to do the research or don't get their news from credible sources, they just end up buying into it.
Yeah. And when you're dealing with a simple audience, and when you're throwing out all these, terms like shell companies, and you're going back 8-9 years, and you're throwing out Burisma and Ukrainian names and Russian names, and you're just spewing all this garbage out there, people buy it. It sounds plausible. But then when you drill down, when you get lawyers like Dan Goldman, Jamie Raskin, Jasmine Crockett, who are pinning them down on these facts, they don't hold up. But the challenge for us is to explain to the American public as best as we can what the truth is in as simple terms as possible, because this stuff can be complicated. And I think I talked about this last week, where I don't know if it was on the show or somebody else, but where David Korn wrote the two of us both wrote pieces on the same thing, on this exact same thing, the Smirnoff investigation. And David Korn, wrote a very lengthy, long speech, article in Mother Jones, and I wrote one a lot shorter and succincter. Now, his was more comprehensive and went into more detail, but in my opinion, what we have to start doing is presenting things in a shorter form, in a simpler form, that people can read in 5 minutes and understand what's going on. And that's what I try to do.
Well, that's why I created 5-Minute News.
Yeah.
It's like people don't have the time. But, because we can do the research and then make the effort to translate it into simple explanations, which is what people need. And I try really hard to simplify the language and make stuff easily digestible. Because no one's interested in politics, let's be honest. But if you can present things in a more connective, cultural way, then I think it chimes with people. And, that's what I'm hoping is going to come out of the Biden camp more, is really thinking about how people need to repeat stuff. They need to hear something and think that it's important enough that they want to tell someone else. And that's what we try and do at Midas Touch, certainly. Okay, let's stay on the IVF story now, because we mentioned Tommy Tuberville not really knowing what it is. He's since kind of tried to get his head around it, but he's still struggling. You posted a very interesting clip of Representative Byron Donalds, and just listen to his language on this.
Said IVF is something that is so critical to a lot of couples. It helps them breed great families. Our country needs that.
All right, let me ask you now about Ukraine.
Why didn't she pick him up on the word breed? Why did she move on? What's happening?
I didn't think it could get any worse than Chuck Todd, and it got worse.
How do you let that slide, though? It's because they, let's be clear here, and maybe we can do some of the analysis. They do think of, this as breeding, don't they?
Yes, they do.
And so this is, there's a whole conversation to be had about the idea of, Republicans and also, Christian nationalists and Christian extremists breeding to try and, repopulate the country with their own. I mean, that's what this boils down to, right?
Yes, this is all part of the great replacement theory stuff. If you go to watch any Charlie Kirk Turning Point USA conference or any of these right-wing conferences, CPAC, you're going to hear this theme, and the theme is people in the West are not getting married young. They're not building families. They're not having lots of babies. And, we're going to be overtaken by other races, other religions, other cultures. And we need more, Western Christian babies. We're in a population decline, et cetera, et cetera. And this all ties into the border and immigration as well. So yeah, so when you so really I don't necessarily think he meant to say that breeding, but that's what's in their head.
It's in the subconscious. Yeah.
It's in the subconscious, and so it comes out.
Yeah.
Because that's the way they look at families now, is you need to breed, you need to have more kids, and it's just an insane way of looking at it. And it's also shows you what they think of women. It really does.
Yeah.
And it shows you, a lot of Republicans now are coming out for IVF because they're saying, well, we want more babies, and anything that'll give us more babies. That's a crazy argument as well to justify it. This is not about society needing more babies. This is about individuals doing what's best for their lives. But you never hear that out of Republicans.
Let's remind people that the story originated in Alabama, where the Alabama court basically said that frozen embryos were children. And this is how it started. Donald Trump's been trying to kind of walk this back a little bit, hasn't he? He's trying to, straddle both sides of this debate.
Yeah, I don't think he's straddling both sides. I think he's all in on, because he saw the polls. I mean, I think he didn't say anything for a couple days because he wasn't really sure what to say. I mean, Donald Trump doesn't care about any of this stuff. I mean, we've already established he doesn't care about abortion. He doesn't care about any of this stuff, really.
He just wants the votes.
He just wants the vote. So he's trying to figure out a way to kind of keep his base happy, but understanding that he's got to win the center in November. And, that's why he's come out he's talked about a 16-week, abortion law, which is basically Roe versus Wade, which is crazy. But he's so afraid of losing this election and going to prison that at this point he's willing to say anything about any of these issues. So, he saw the polling that showed that 86% of the public was against this ruling, and he immediately came out against it.
It's, again, the kind of flip-flopping is going to hurt them in the long run, not taking a position and sticking with it. And then that position changing on a local level, state level, and then on a national level with Donald Trump. Is there enough, strategy between the kind of, the local talking points and then Donald Trump, or is he just busking and playing to whichever audience he happens to be in front of?
I mean, he is doing that, but here's the problem for him and for the other Republicans. I think they would very much like to be more liberal on abortion, but they're stuck. They can't. If Donald Trump actually goes out in a rally and says, I'm for 16 weeks, he'll get booed. I mean, they'll go crazy. That'll be one of the few things that will get him in trouble with the base, because the base believes that abortion is murdering babies. And so, you can't come out now and say, okay, well, I've agreed with you about that for all these years, but now we need to win this next election so it's not murdering babies anymore. I mean, so this is the problem. So they're trying to find a way to message it where, they're kind of not making their base mad, but fooling moderates into thinking that they're moderate on this issue. But the good news is, on this particular issue where we've talked about Democrats struggle to message other things, this is an issue that Democrats message superbly and really understand the issues. Vice President Harris really understands the issues. And this is an issue where Democrats make some great ads. And so it's just not going to work. It's not going to work for Republicans.
I've just made a video actually on the abortion debate and how, in my opinion, the election will come down to this subject in November, because there's 167.5 million women in this country. And in fact, women vote more than men vote. And women really are the driving force for this election. And, Trump has taken ownership of reversing Roe.
And there's so few single issue voters. I mean, in terms of like where one issue is going to trump all other issues for them. And the Republicans have this with like immigration, the border, that there's a big chunk of the Republican base that's all they care about, But I think there's this big chunk of middle of the road women, even Republicans, and women who have never voted before and maybe who aren't even registered, who are going to show up just for this one issue to vote on. And that's a very powerful thing in politics when you have a single issue that can turn people out like that.
And I do think that people like Mike Johnson are very naive about this because, you know, he's grown up in this extremist church, this Christian nationalist movement where to them this is normal. You know, this whole anti-abortion stance is normal. And I do think that, you know, he's not a smart guy. He's not a traveled guy. He probably thinks that everybody thinks like him. You know, I've seen that in so many of the interviews. He's so totally committed to his views, his warped views of America. And I think that Republicans are going to get a nasty surprise in November.
And this is the problem with choosing a guy like Mike Johnson as your leader. This is really the issue because, you know, it's one thing to be a freedom. We've talked about this. The Freedom Caucus members, the far right members, are all from districts that are like plus 20, plus 30 Republican, where they can't lose. It's impossible for them to lose. So they can be backbenchers and lob bombs and throw bombs and criticize leadership and not compromise and not work with Democrats on any issue, and it doesn't hurt them in any way. And that's fine. I mean, that works for that. That's the way Congress has been for 200 years. You've always had those handful of people who can get away with that because of the districts they're in. The problem is you don't put them in charge. You don't put one of them in charge. So you have this toxic combination with Mike Johnson of not only is he one of those guys who's very far right and is used to just doing whatever he wants, but he's also a fanatic. He's an evangelical fanatic. So he believes that God is on his side and God is guiding him, and he talks to God and God is telling him what to do. So when you have someone like that who believes he's essentially doing God's will, he could have every single member of the House against him. He could have every member of the American public against him. He could be the only one. But if he believes that that's what God wants him to do, he will not back down and he will not compromise. And you cannot have that kind of a person as Speaker of the House. And that's why we're in the situation we're in right now.
What just to predict, what's going to happen with there's a couple of things that are at play now. There's money for Ukraine, there's money for Israel, but then there's also an impending government shutdown as well. And Mike Johnson is at the center of these decisions. Just give us a little prediction on how you think that's going to play out in the next week or two.
I mean, the breaking news today is he's wanting another delay. You know, he's wanting to kick the can down the road for another week or two. And the thing is, you know, they just took almost 3 weeks off.
Yes.
You know, now they want more time, you know, and this is what everybody said when he sent them into recess. Why did he send them in the recess? Because he had his leadership summit in Miami that he wanted to do, that he needed to go to. And his members wanted to go fundraise and do podcasts and make money. And so that's why he calls another recess. So then you come back with 3 days before the government's going to shut down and you're scrambling and you won't make a deal. And so now he needs more time. And you know, I think that Democrats are inclined to give him, you know, a week or something like that. But I don't see this working out very well. I mean, when he came in, his plan was, we're going to break the budget into 9 different pieces. We're going to pass 9 separate appropriations bills for each area of the government, because that's what he always said he was going to do as a backbencher. This is a Freedom Caucus thing. We're not going to pass one big budget up or down vote. We're going to break it into pieces and vote on each individual thing. And we all said it's not practical. It's not going to work. And what did they find out? I think he passed 4 or 5, but you got to pass all of them to have a budget. And they can't do it. And so where are we at? We're in this mess. So you put this guy who doesn't know how to negotiate, won't compromise, think that God's telling him what to do. And then he's got the guy down in Mar-a-Lago who wants chaos, who's telling him to block everything. So I don't know how this plays out. I mean, it looks like a shutdown, I would think.
But Trump wants a shutdown, doesn't he? And
the
Republicans want a shutdown because they're not patriots. They don't care about America. They don't care about civil servants or American workers who, you know, and invariably it's the people that work for, you know, the federal government who have to carry the can on this. You know, they don't get paid. And so this is the sadness, really. And I do wish that Democrats could really identify this and talk about it more, this kind of lack of patriotism when you actually want the government to shut down to make Joe Biden look bad. It's such a cheap, dirty trick.
For all the Democrats' criticism of Mitch McConnell, and I think they're all justified, the number one reason why Donald Trump hates Mitch McConnell is because Mitch McConnell made deals with Democrats to pass budgets and to keep the government open.
Yeah.
This is what has infuriated Donald Trump. He's been calling on Mitch McConnell to shut the government down since he left office multiple times, and he won't. And every time he goes along with, makes a compromise with Pelosi or with the Democrats, Donald Trump goes nuts. And so, but finally, and McCarthy was the same way. McCarthy for all his faults, McCarthy was a deal maker too.
Yeah.
He compromised, he made deals, but now he's finally got the guy in Mike Johnson who is digging his heels in and who won't budge. And this is Donald Trump. This is what Donald Trump has wanted since he left office from Congress.
Well, because Mike Johnson is not just a puppet, but he actually looks like a puppet as well. He really does look like someone's got their hand up his jacket. Okay, let's. I want to talk about this Fani Willis situation because I've been very moved by this, the way that they've turned this whole case around and put her on the stand instead of Donald Trump. They've made her the focus of this investigation, and a Trump lawyer is attacking her and her father and trying to get to the bottom of her relationship with this prosecutor. I have a little clip from this hearing. I'll just show it and then we'll talk about it.
Willis and Nathan Wade were in a romantic relationship, correct?
Correct.
And it began at the time that they were both municipal court judges, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, based on privilege. That would be covered in the attorney-client privilege. Okay, overruled. I do not have knowledge of it starting or when it started.
Terrence, you told me that it started when they were both municipal court judges, though, correct?
That is incorrect.
Tell me something, Ron. If the prosecutor and Fani Willis are on the same side, what difference does it make if they were having a relationship or not? I appreciate that this is what they're trying to turn into some kind of, a sticking point. But I just don't see how either of them are compromised if they're having a private relationship.
Here's their argument. Are you ready for this?
I need to hear it because no one else has been able to explain it to me.
I'll tell you what it is.
Okay.
The argument is that Fani Willis only indicted Trump and all of these people so that she could hire her boyfriend, pay him tons of money out of taxpayer funds, and that they could take vacations together and do all these trips with all the money that she was paying him. In other words, that this whole RICO indictment was for her to create a job, a very well-paying job for her boyfriend. That is the basically.
But that's why I don't get it, because that just doesn't have legs.
It's a preposterous.
It's preposterous
argument, but it's the excuse to air all this dirty laundry.
Yeah, which is a Trump tactic, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, it's messy, it's ugly, it's not cool for her to have a relationship with a subordinate employee. I mean, she pledged that she would never do that when she ran for office. And so what they want to do is, none of that is relevant to the case, but they just want to smear her, and they want to smear him, and they want to throw as much nonsense out there to the public, because if the public doesn't believe that these prosecutions are legit, then you're going to see that reflected in the polls, which it is somewhat, where you have people are asked, if Donald Trump is convicted of some in Georgia, will that change your vote? And many people are still saying no. Now, some are saying it will, but they're saying no because they are buying into this stuff, that all these prosecutions are rigged, that they're all not legit, and these prosecutors are all rogue. So you've seen them go after Letitia James, of course. You've seen them go after the prosecutor, the Manhattan District Attorney. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, but they've gone after him.
Yep.
You know, they've gone after Fani Willis, and they've gone after Jack Smith as well. Personally.
But what is the theme here? You know, here's the thing. The theme is racism, as I see it, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that, again, the media is not really picking up on. Is that they see Fani Willis or Letitia James or even Judge Tanya Chutkan as easy targets for racism. You know, why are black women trying to prosecute a rich white man? You know, this is the patriarchy, but it's also racism, systemic or blatant, however you want to look at it. And that's how I felt when I was watching Fani Willis giving evidence, is that, you know, this is just racist.
And the judges in New York are Jewish. And I think I don't know if Jack Smith is Jewish, but Trump has implied that.
Trump has claimed it, yeah.
Yeah.
He said, why did he change his name? What was his name before, he kept saying.
Yep. There's that steady theme running through it. And to some extent, you know, Fani and her dad, even innocently, without meaning to, played right into their hands in some of their testimony, because they kept saying, like, this is a black thing. Like, for example, keeping cash, 6 months cash.
Yeah.
And they equated that to the black experience of sometimes the father said sometimes they wouldn't take my credit card.
Yeah.
So I always carry cash. So when they brought up sort of race in their testimony, which both of them did a few different times, it plays right into the right-wing hands. They blew that up in their media, saying,
well, they don't care that it's true. I mean, that's the other thing. Again, not being able to see the world through a black lens, or America through a black lens. It's very sad that, you know, this is still happening. You know, Donald Trump, at one hand, you know, at a black conservatives conference, trying to convince people that he is as persecuted as black people, and then the next thing you know, his lawyer is trying to take down Fani Willis for having a consensual relationship with an adult. It's so racist.
Yeah, it really is. And it goes to show, like what we talked about, when you're prosecuting somebody like Trump, you know, you got to have your own house buttoned up, because they're going to come for you in every way that they possibly can. So, and when you're having a relationship with the other prosecutor who's prosecuting Donald Trump, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all low hanging fruit, and Trump is not frightened to pick it. Okay, we haven't got long left. I want to talk about this argument between Mark Cuban and Elon Musk. Just I'll put the posting. I think it was a tweet, wasn't it, up on the screen here? But this is what Mark Cuban posted. Just explain to us the story behind this.
Yeah, they've been in a running debate for a couple of weeks now about DEI, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, and corporate environment, and where, you know, Cuban has been really making some really good arguments and taking on right-wingers. See, I don't really debate them on social media because I don't think there's much point to it, but Cuban certainly is not shy, and not shy about taking on Elon Musk either, and libs of TikTok, as you see here. So yeah, I think, you know, here's the thing. I think people need to talk about Mark Cuban as a future presidential candidate.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I think that he's a very intriguing person. I mean, obviously, he is a real billionaire, very successful, pretty progressive. You know, own his own small. He's in the healthcare business. He's in the
That's right. He set up an online
business.
Pharmacy to try that has transparent pricing, so they only make $5 profit on each transaction.
Yeah, I mean, this guy is what Musk claims to be. That's I think the point I want to make is that Musk claims to really care about humanity and people and advancing the cause of humanity, but I don't think he really does care about those things. I think he has a much different agenda, but I think Mark Cuban really does. And you see that he's got a good soul and a good heart. I don't know much about his politics. I just, know from listening to him and following him, but I don't even know if he's a Democrat or an independent. I don't know what he is, but I think if there's anybody out there who's not in elective office right now, is sort of outside the political sphere, like a Trump, but who's a real legitimate person, not a fake.
Who has a soul and an element of goodness inside of them. Yeah.
I mean, if I could pick any like oligarch billionaire out there to run for president, I mean, I think might be my choice.
It's a very interesting position. I need to do some research. I think we both need to do some research, don't we? We need to kind of really look into this guy and take a look. There is a caveat to all of this. And does he want to be president? You know, this is the Michelle Obama issue, isn't it? Everyone's saying she should run. And she's like, hell no, I ain't running for president. I've been there and it's not something I want to go back to.
That's why, I think the way he's talking lately, it seems like he's getting into politics.
Interesting.
That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. I mean, I'm down for your predictions, Ron, always. There was another tweet, actually, just on the old kind of Twitter front. This one came from Christopher Rufo, talking about, it's really an exposure, really, about how Republicans are coming after birth control now, after the abortion reversal, suddenly now contraception is on the people's minds, and certainly the pill as well. This message, this posting said, "So what? The pill causes health problems for many women. Recreational sex is a large part of the reason we have so many single mother households, which drives poverty, crime, and dysfunction. The point of sex is to create children, and this is natural, normal, and good." I mean, this goes back a little bit to what we were saying earlier about, what Byron Donalds was saying, about how you breeding families rather than, making babies for the right reasons. Tell us the story behind this.
It absolutely ties into that. Absolutely. I mean, he could have stopped with the pill causes health problems for many women. Okay, that's true. It does. But he didn't stop there. Okay, he's using that as his excuse to get to the point that he's really trying to make. And by the way, who is Chris Rufo? Chris Rufo is the person who is behind all the CRT scam stuff. He's the person that Ron DeSantis made a trustee as part of the Florida University system to dismantle one of the most progressive, liberal colleges in Florida.
Yeah.
This is a bad dude. But usually he doesn't talk about this subject, but here he is. And we've always said that, Republicans are trying to get into the bedrooms. They're trying to impose their values, which aren't even real. They're fake. They don't even live their lives the way that they preach to other people.
No, there's a double standard with all of this.
Yeah, but this is how they want other people to believe. So I mean, to say, so what you're saying is the pill is bad. And oh, by the way, the pill has led to, since the 60s, recreational sex out of marriage, because now it's safe and you don't have to worry about being pregnant. And that has led to single motherhood, poverty, all these. Okay, so what are you proposing exactly? Okay, let's assume everything you just said is true, and I'm not going to stipulate it is, but let's just assume that. What is your solution? To ban birth control? Because when you really think about it, Roe versus Wade, the precedent for Roe versus Wade was Griswold versus Connecticut. It was based on the Griswold decision. The Griswold decision said contraception is a constitutional right. So it's not too far to, if you're against Roe versus Wade and you think that's bad law, for you to then say, you know what, contraception is also not. You also don't have a right to that.
I mean, it's very worrying, isn't it? That really, I think all of these aspects. We've talked about the racism, which seems to underpin so much of GOP policy, even, gerrymandering and all sorts. This racism is very much at the heart of a lot of that. But also this misogyny, this blatant misogyny, controlling women. And this goes back to the Christian nationalist movement, where, women take a very subservient role in the Christian family to breed children, as they describe, but also to play second fiddle to their man. I mean, the double standard is that, so many of these people are living double lives anyway. And, there's a lot of them that are gay and a lot of them that are having extramarital affairs. And it all gets covered up by claiming that, God is their guiding light, shining light. And it's just rubbish. But I do think that it's important that this stuff is exposed in the lead up to November, because, the GOP is coming on after your human rights, your right to contraception. I mean, it's just crazy that they think that politicians can meddle in this type of stuff. It's dystopian.
Yeah, and you also hear them sometimes in these conferences slip, and they'll say, well, we need to get to a point in our economy where families can afford to have moms stay home and raise children again, and we can get back to like the 1950s where you had one breadwinner, in the stay-at-home mom. So they tip their hand all the time with their little comments that really that is what they want. They want to go back to a traditional, stay-at-home mom situation where women stay home with men, have lots of kids. It's also why they're against gay relationships as well, for the same reason. Anything that liberates women and advances them and makes them independent, they're against it. And they'll find their excuse. Like the excuse here is public health. It's bad. It's bad for your health to take the pill. We're just looking out for you.
And it would be remiss not to mention that so much domestic violence and domestic abuse is baked into this as well. And that there is a whole, there's a whole subject, we don't have time for it today, but, of where these relationships are so dysfunctional and women bear the brunt of a lot of this. And then there's the homeschooling stuff as well, which again, women have to...
That ties into it.
Into it as well. Okay, listen, we have to finish in a couple of minutes, but I want to end with George Santos, because he didn't go to CPAC, did he? And he had quite a lot to say about it. Let's have a little listen to him.
Hey everyone, George Santos here. Just wanted to stop by to say hello and just to kind of give people a little 2 cents of my thoughts and why I didn't go to CPAC and my thoughts on CPAC, because I've been asked that many times. Why have I not gone 2 years in a row after going for many, many years? I don't think it does anything. B, I think it's a waste of money. And C, it is supposed to be something to motivate children and young conservatives to feel energized, but I don't see CPAC doing any of that other than taking all that money from the donors and hobnobbing it up to the high life in sweet parties, doused in champagne and liquor and food and all this bourgeoisie stuff. Really nothing to advance the cause. It's a big party, right? So it's almost like the frat parties that Matt Schlapp was either never actually attended, or maybe the ones that he just reminisces about so much about that he wants to have them every year. So you pick. I don't know. This isn't indicative on criticizing Matt. I just don't think it's a place where there's anything productive going on other than gossip, nasty vitriol, and complete utter chaos of the party tearing itself apart from the inside. Now, I do have friends who speak there and I love them, and hey, you're the last saving grace that place has. But the reality is it's a dying model. CPAC is so over. People aren't even there for the speeches. The speeches this year, people were speaking to half-empty ballrooms. And the worst part is people are always constantly mistreated as if they're scum of the earth. I've experienced that firsthand. So, look, take it as you wish, but especially after seeing one of my former volunteers and constituents be mistreated, him and his son, who's a special needs child, by the way, were mistreated and asked to give up their seats. It's just baloney. I'm so done. Guys, don't fall for it. It's a trap. Bye.
Thanks, George Santos. A beautiful upper set of porcelain veneers there, we should note. I mean, I can't, I don't know. I've never actually wasted any time analyzing this guy because I knew that he was a flash in the pan. He'd be in, he'd cause trouble, and then they'd get him out. And he's just trying to kind of stay in the picture, isn't he?
Until he goes to prison. He's got his trial in September.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, I thought either he's using Smile Actives or he's got a great new set of veneers from doing all those cameos because those chiclets were blinding. Yeah. But, he made, but cutting through all of that, he makes a great point. Everything he says in there is true. And that's sort of what I like about it. He's saying what a lot of people won't say. He's telling the truth, which is CPAC was for many years the only game in town. It was the event of the year for the Republicans, the big, and they all fought with each other over who was going to get the speaking engagements, who was going to get invited, who wasn't. It was a big deal. But then other groups, all these other groups like Charlie Kirk and others have created these knockoff events that are very similar, but sort of younger, maybe a little hipper, and better, more edgy speakers. And CPAC has started to lose a lot of its popularity. What he said is true. The Schlaps, Matt and Mercedes, got very arrogant, got very greedy, very full of themselves, and treated people like garbage. And so people were already very upset about the Schlaps and upset about CPAC, and they had all their alternatives. Then what happens is Schlapp gets the lawsuit by the male staffer who said that he molested him, basically, the male staffer who worked for Herschel Walker. And, as we've talked about, when you have allegations that you're closeted gay, that doesn't play very well in the right-wing community. And you heard him when he's talking about Matt Schlapp misses his days as a frat boy. That's what Santos is talking about. Right. He's making the illusions that he's closeted gay. And so he's right. I mean, CPAC is completely going downhill, falling apart, which is good. And the only thing keeping it propped up right now is Trump, that Trump is the headliner every year and he agrees to do it. If Trump either isn't able to do it because he's in prison or he decides not to do it, I think CPAC's done.
Yeah. Well, they had the former British Prime Minister, Liz Truss, who was Prime Minister for just 49 days, who has now embraced the far and extreme right in order to sell her books. And that was pretty embarrassing from my end. Listen, we have to finish. I just want to announce the breaking news that is the U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to decide Donald Trump's claim of immunity from prosecution on charges he brought by a special counsel involving his efforts to overturn his 2020 election loss. That's going to be heard in April. So that is the breaking news, and stay with Midas Touch for more on that as the story develops. But literally, that just broke a couple of minutes ago. Ron Filipkowski, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. We'll continue to read your efforts on MidasTouch.com, where you are editor-in-chief. I'm Anthony Davis. Join us next Wednesday at the same time. We'll do another Uncovered for you, and if you'd like to listen to the audio podcast, you can download that later tonight. Have yourself a great week.